You come over the Beltway in Washington, D.C., you see this extraordinary building, and you wonder what in the world goes on there. And the fact that it's only open to members of my faith makes people have all sorts of ideas about what could happen there. And I wanted people to come see and get a little understanding of our faith and how it is that we worship, why we worship the way we do, the role of temples, the role of marriage, the eternal nature of family that's part of our faith. These elements, I think, were really able to be brought home by showing people the places where we are married, where we can be baptized. I think for me it was an opportunity to say, come on in, the water's fine, you'll enjoy what you see here, and you'll learn something about a faith that in most cases people don't understand terribly well. We had a large group. We got a bus from the Capitol Police, and they were kind enough to drive us out to the temple. We had, 15 or 20 senators that joined Senator Lee and me. We spoke to them a bit as we came in. We began by saying, you're going to be disappointed because this is not like a cathedral. This is not a big open building with extraordinary vistas. Instead, it's a series of small rooms, each room dedicated to a particular ordinance which we carry out, which we were able to describe when we went there. And so I think it was an opportunity for sharing and understanding and dispelling some notions. The earliest Romney convert to my church was a man named Miles Romney. In 1837, he joined our church in Preston, England. He and his family came by a ship to New Orleans, went up the Mississippi, got to Nauvoo, Illinois, and he worked on the Illinois Temple. Then when the members of my church were driven from Illinois by mobs, he was one of those that wanted to go west but couldn't afford to get a wagon and oxen to go. So they stopped in Burlington, Iowa, and there they worked for several years, saved money. When he had enough money, put a team together of oxen, went to Salt Lake City. The first year, they lived in their wagon during the winter and on church ground, looking for a place to ultimately settle. But he would then ultimately go to southern Utah and helped as the superintendent of construction both on the St. George, Utah Tabernacle and the St. George, Utah Temple. And interestingly, he fell from the second-story window of the temple during its construction, became ill by virtue of doing so. It cost him his life. But his son, Miles Park Romney, was my great-great-grandfather. Then he had a son named Gaskell Romney, and then my dad, George Romney. So we're a whole series of Romneys. On my dad's maternal side was a gentleman named Parley P. Pratt, who joined the church, I think, in the 1830s as well. So, yeah, my ancestors come from early days of my faith. Well, I think our family has a legacy of faith and a commitment to the church itself. I have a firm conviction that the teachings of the church are true. At the same time, I have a recognition that the church itself as an institution has extraordinary benefits for me and for my family. It kept me from alcohol and tobacco as a kid, which made a real difference. It encouraged me to get married and to have kids. I probably wouldn't have 5 sons were it not for the teachings of my church, and they brought me extraordinary happiness and joy. It taught me how to give speeches in public settings because the church members are the ones who give the speeches on Sundays. It gave me leadership opportunities. It required me to serve other people. That's not something I was probably inclined to do were it not for the church's insistence that I do so. It gave me opportunities to go outside our country. I served my church 2.5 years in France. It gave me perspective on other parts of the world. It gave me appreciation for the unusual nature of the American Constitution, it being inspired, as we believe, by God. So a whole series of benefits came by virtue of my faith, and that has been passed on to me by my ancestors, but passed also to my children. My wife is the first member of her family to join our church. And so she becomes, if you will, a carrier of the legacy as well to our children and our grandchildren. Well, I don't have the historical context of Joseph Smith's run for president, although I presume he recognized that he stood no chance whatsoever, but was intending to see if he couldn't get redress for the suffering that members of our faith had endured and the fact that they had been chased from their homes, in many cases murdered. And was trying to, if you will, make a statement. When I ran, I actually expected that I had a chance to win. So things had changed over the coming 150 years that have passed between our races. I think America recognizes that we are a diverse nation, not just through ethnicity, but also based on our religions. And by and large, people in America accept religious differences and don't choose who they vote for based on what religion they come from. There will always be those who have strong religious feelings about any faith that's not their own. And that'll always be a stream in any nation, I presume. But for the most part, that's not the case in our country. And our country was formed in many respects acknowledging that we were going to welcome people of other faiths to this country and select individuals to serve as political servants, political leaders, without regard to their faith. And, so I lost not because I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but because people thought that Barack Obama would be a better president. And I think that's probably the better way for things to be decided in our country. But I don't think we'll ever lose, the fact that for some people, religion is a touchstone issue in their decision as to who they're going to vote for. There will always be, in any society, an effort on the part of some to impose their will on others. And the great genius of America from its founding, and I look back to the founders and say, I simply have a hard time comprehending the genius of these individuals. To say, to have a nation which is going to be assembled from many different ethnicities and people of different faiths, we have to accommodate differences and allow those differences to grow and to have people still love the country and be united despite those differences. And that's part of the genius of America. There will nevertheless be efforts on the part of the majority from time to time to change that and to insist that their way is the right way. And you're seeing that today. There are people who would want to impose their point of view on others and say, look, all religions must teach the following things. That's just not consistent with the principles of the founding. So we will always have to protect religious liberty and protect the right of people to believe and worship in ways we disagree with. I remember as a kid, people saying, I will fight for the right of people to say and do things I disagree with. That's the genius of what we have, because that says that this is a nation which can welcome the best and brightest from all over the world and accommodate their different points of view and the things they consider most dear. At the founding of the country, as the individuals who wrote the document of the Constitution, they established a document which has many extraordinary concepts and breakthrough historic innovations, but they described this as forming a more perfect union over time. They didn't suggest we were perfect from the outset. And clearly the greatest violation of the Constitution and the principles of the founding was slavery. But of a secondary nature was the fact that religions were persecuted. Our religion received persecution. The governor of Missouri went along with an extermination order for members of my faith. The president of the United States did not defend members of my church and my ancestors from persecution as he would have done had he followed the principles of the Constitution. But over the years, we have become a more perfect union, and we've got a ways to go. I look back and say, it was not perfect here, but it was here where the foundation was laid for what has been a nation which welcomes religious diversity. And by and large, the people of a good conscience and sobriety accept religious differences without persecution and without blame. Well, I think the Constitution and the Supreme Court would decide what is the limit upon which a religion would, be able to go without violating the principles of the Constitution, uh, and uh, and and that's going to have a great deal of latitude. Surely, if a religion were offering human sacrifice or even animal sacrifice, you'd expect the court to say no, no, or the laws of the country to say no, 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 you can't do that, and the court would probably uphold those laws. But by and large, barring unusual exceptions of that nature, the courts have recognized that the Constitution requires individuals to be able to practice their religion as they feel their conscience dictates. And that is a privilege which is enjoyed by people, whether they're Jewish, Christian, Muslim, or basically any other faith. Well, I have ancestors. I mentioned the first members of my family that joined our church. They did not have multiple wives, but one ancestor did. Miles Park Romney had, I think, 4 or 5 wives and many, many children. So I'm not going to be terribly critical of my own ancestors, but I'm not in favor of plural marriage. And I'm happy that our church does not practice it, has actually indicated that people who do will be excommunicated from the church. I don't know if the court would do the same thing today. I don't know that I'm enough of a legal scholar to define precisely what would and would not have been acceptable in the court's view. But I'm glad we don't have plural marriage in the country. I'm glad it's not something that's legal and perfectly comfortable in a society that insists that marriage is a relationship between a man and a woman. I think Orrin Hatch really will go down in Senate history, not just for the many, many years that he served, but for the fact that he was a real proponent and scholar as it related to religious tolerance and religious liberty and the rights of individuals to practice their faith as their conscience demanded. And wanted to make sure that the arm of government was not used to enforce a point of view that may be held by the majority or by some minority that somehow came into power. And so he was always looking for ways to protect religion and religious practice from government overreach, and was responsible for a series of acts, as you know, that are designed to protect religious freedom. I think there was a time when in the U.S. that religions had far more influence than they do today. I think the sex abuse scandal in the Catholic Church dramatically reduced the influence of the Catholic Church. And there have been other faiths that have become so politically oriented that they've lost some influence on the part of people who disagree with them politically. And so I'm afraid that various religions don't have the kind of influence they had back in the days when Senator Kennedy and Senator Hatch were working together to fashion various pieces of legislation. You've noted that the number of people in the country who attend religious services every Sunday has gone down steadily over time. So whether or not new legislation could be fashioned today that would receive bipartisan support of the nature of the religious acts that have been passed in the past, I don't have the answer for you on that. But I do believe that any attempt to try and interfere with the free practice of religion would be met with a strong resistance from the court, the Supreme Court that is, as well as most members of the United States Senate. I think the recognition has to be held by our citizenry at large and by our leaders that if we're going to continue to be the place where the best and the brightest of the world want to assemble, to bring their technologies and their ideas, and to lead the world in technology and innovation, in science, as well as in the soft sciences, if you will. If we want to be a place of gathering, recognizing that we are a diverse nation, people here of differing faiths and different beliefs are going to have to be comfortable. If this is a place where only a certain number of people are comfortable, we can't assemble the great of the world. We won't keep the energy and the passion of the great that we already have here. People will be pulling the country apart. A united country can focus on the issues of our time, whether that's climate, whether that's the emergence of China as a great power, whether it's economic vitality. We need to pull together. If we're pulling apart, America can't fulfill the mission that it has. To be, as Ronald Reagan said, the great light on the hill means that we have to come together. And if we're pulling apart and criticizing one another, attacking one another, and insisting that someone else set aside their most fundamental beliefs, then America pulls apart. And if America pulls apart, we'll be passed by nations that are more united, like China, despite China having, I believe, a whole series of very awful human rights conditions that we would find unacceptable. There will always be individuals who feel that their point of view is the point of view that should be accepted by all of us, and that the arm of the state should enforce that. And there are those who will feel, with regards to, let's say, same-sex marriage, or practices related to providing for individuals who have a different sexual orientation, that should not be allowed. And that's probably the area of greatest debate that's occurring right now. And while we have different points of view, I think what the folks in Utah were able to accomplish is actually a pretty good model. They said, look, let's provide greater rights to people who have different sexual orientation than simple male, female, and at the same time, assure that religions can practice what they would like to practice. And I think that compromise, called the Utah Compromise, makes some sense, and who knows whether that'll happen at the federal level. But I think recognizing, again, we are different, we have differences among our people, but different beliefs as well, and we can accommodate those things. That's kind of part of what makes America work so well, or it has in the past, which is we're really different. We're not all the same. And but we allow that, and we defend that. And there are other parts of the world where they don't allow that. I mean, look at China. They have a population of Uyghurs. They're saying, we don't want to have that. We're going to wipe them out. We're going to put them in concentration camps. We're going to commit genocide against them because we don't want any difference. That's not America. America says, we allow difference. That difference has been part of our culture. It's what we have. It's you might not want it, but it's what we have. And don't try and tear America apart, but instead accommodate ways to live with those differences. To me personally, free exercise of religion says that I and my family are able to exercise our faith in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints fully and completely in every way we wish. And the state is not going to say to us that our religion is going to be discriminated against or prevented from carrying out the practices which it deems appropriate. And are there any bounds or limits to that? There were in the past with plural marriage, and I'm not going to argue over that one. But I believe that it's a wonderful thing to live in a place where I and my family can worship God as we choose. I think it's important for us to recognize that people coming here from other countries has been part of our heritage. It is who we are. We bring in about 1 million or so people per year legally into the country. We need those people to grow. Our population, our domestic population, is not replacing itself. Our birth rate does not keep up with our death rate. So to grow as a society, even to maintain our economy, requires immigration. And so people will come from all over the world. And for them to be happy here and feel welcomed here is important to our productivity and the strength of our economy. So it's important for us to welcome people and to recognize that they will have differing religions, different cultures. It's not that all cultures are equal, but all cultures have equal opportunity to practice their faith and their cultural practices as they choose, in order for them to feel like America is their country. I want the Afghans coming here, the Ukrainians coming here, the Hong Kong residents coming here to feel that America is their country. It is. Once they come here legally and become citizens, this is their country. They're just as American as I am or you are. And that's important to America's vitality and America's strength going forward. Recognizing that we will have people coming here from other places, accept them, have them feel this is their home. An important part of that is allowing them to practice their religion and their culture as they feel they wish to do.